Good morning. Still getting used to webinars, and when we had our wonderful seminars where we would have an answer back from our audience and could shuffle around to see everybody. What a great time that was. Right now we're doing things a little differently, but we're delighted to have you with us today for our June Seniors Living Smarter webinar. When you find yourself, or from we to me, when you find yourself making all the decisions by yourself. It's really going to be broader than that, but still the importance of making decisions and being informed. I'm Virginia Lazenby, certified senior downsizing coach and realtor. I'm the host and founder of the Seniors Living Smarter seminars. And we're just so pleased to have you with us today as attendees, pleased to have our panelists, and find out more about it in just a minute. The purpose of the Seniors Living Smarter seminars is to educate, equip, and inspire seniors to make informed choices and empowered decisions regarding their lifestyle goals. We were just having a discussion prior to going live this morning with our panelists, and it always comes up the importance of people being informed, being educated, and that's what our seminars are definitely committed to. And running, we've been doing them now for 5 years, so it's an exciting time, and to see people continuing to learn, ask more questions. I want to see if we can pull up our sponsor slide here. Okay, that's the way I have it set. There we go. There. All right. We'll come back up to the sponsor slide in just a minute. As I do want to give a special thanks to the sponsors who helped to make these webinars possible. Silver Key Benefits, we'll be hearing from them in future seminars. Some of you attended a Zoom coffee a few weeks ago where we learned a little bit more about the long-term care insurance analysis and so on. And remember that our sponsors are there to help you with information. We'll be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow, and it will have their contact information too. So thanks to Silver Key Benefits. Traditions Health. Chris Willis is with Traditions Health and is one of our panelists today. So you'll be hearing more about that work. It is actually a hospice program, but so much more than hospice. Speaking of people needing information, we often think of hospice as the last couple of weeks or so, but they offer so much more. So, you'll hear a little bit later, Chris is just a tremendous resource for a variety of areas that he's served in the senior industry. Visiting Angels, we appreciate, we've had Stacy Scarborough with Visiting Angels on our panel several times. When you're needing home care, a great organization, very conscientious about their work, and I hear wonderful reviews. So we hope you'll share the word about what these services provide. The Wesleyan. I think Mandy Hastings is with us today. She's at the Wesleyan Independent Living. They've been a tremendous support because the Wesleyan offers independent living, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, rehab, home health, home care, and hospice. So a great resource to turn to. And Seniors Living Smarter services. That's my business. As a certified senior downsizing coach, my goal is really to help people with the transition. Yes, I am a realtor, but my services are much broader than that. I've seen the need to support people through the whole process. And as a coach, helping people think through, guiding, being a sounding board, bringing resources for everything from where do I want my next home to be? What is independent living, assisted living, decisions about being close to family or not. Those are things we can do early on, not just when you're ready to move, but we can start planning a year or two out. It can be a big help. I have great people I bring in to help with the move management, the sorting, organizing, the moving, which can be so overwhelming, people shut down. We want to be there to help keep things going. Also, we have great services to help with the liquidation, what's left, and then property preparation and the real estate. But That's what Seniors Living Smarter Services is all about, to ease that transition for the senior and their family, to take away some of the overwhelm. And this is one of our service outgrowths of that, is to offer these seminars. Okay. I want to acknowledge some special attendees today too. I want to acknowledge everyone for being here. I think we're around 45. I've lost count of where we are. Actually, more than that, because some people are couples watching, and so we're glad to have everybody with us. And we need to do a shout out to Carl and Fran Cook, who are celebrating their 65th wedding anniversary today. So happy anniversary to Carl and Fran. They've been regular attendees of our seminars. And we want to give a special welcome to Gretchen Sutherland, a friend of Ann Gowdy's, who is joining us from Mount Vernon, Iowa. So I think that's kind of a neat statement about the value of our seminars when regular attendees reach out to their friends and invite them to join us. One of the benefits of webinars. Also, I want to give a shout out to Ann Gowdy, Linda and Lansing Prescott, who are with us today, Linda Schellenberg, Beverly Staley's with us, Cheryl Wills, who joined with me last October for a brainstorming session about topics for the 2020 seminars. And then we've gone on to clarify a little bit more about and organizing. So much of it is about being prepared. So you'll learn more about that. But I appreciate that, those people giving us input on what they thought would be valuable webinars for our attendees. Let's see. Oh, one thing I want to call to your attention is that at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a place where you can raise hands, and we will go through our panel. We have planned discussion, then we will open it up for questions from the floor. And so we will, you raise your hand and we'll call on you, unmute you so you can ask your question. So I want to get that format part out of the way, but I want to go back to our topic today. From we to me, when you find yourself making all the decisions by yourself. And, being prepared, we all know we need to do that, but sometimes it's the doing it that doesn't happen. I often hear, I need to understand more about our finances at home, or retirement accounts or annuities, but we'll talk about it. My husband will explain it to me someday, or the wife maybe explain it to the husband someday, but sometimes we wait too late for those some days, and we want to encourage people to have those conversations, get these materials organized now. So our goal today is to make real the we to me, and to encourage you to take action with specific suggestions. At the end of the session today, I'll be sharing a document that you'll receive by email tomorrow, 10 commitments to organize for smarter decisions. And that's a compilation of a lot of ideas and materials that people have said, we need to have organized, and we'll share that with you at the end of our time this morning. We know that some of you are couples planning together, and hopefully we can value that by peace of mind that we will bring to our spouse, knowing that we both have a good understanding of our finances, our legal terms, where our papers are, and so on. Others of you are already alone, and you're looking to organize the information for family members or loved ones who will be responsible for your estate. And as always with our webinars, some of you will go away from today and say, well, I knew all that. Give yourself a pat on the back, an affirmation for being prepared. Others of you, I hope we will identify next steps, those action steps that you can take to move you further along this journey. So today, I'm going to let our expert panelists introduce themselves in a minute. What we have done, or what I wanted to do, is to really focus on the power of story to make us think. Not just, okay, go get these legal documents done. We're going to have a session on that in a couple of months. But I think when we hear the story of other people who have been through this journey, what worked well for them, perhaps what they wish they would have known more about. And that's what you're going to be hearing today. And then we also have, that will be from Betty Jagan and Virginia Reed. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. And Chris Willis, who is with Traditions Health and has extensive background in healthcare and community health, assisted living communities, and is a fantastic resource. We'll talk more about that too. And the other name you see up on the screen, Jeff Grant. Jeff works with me on marketing, and he is helping us with the technology of Zoom and webinars. So he's our alternative host today. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to say, let's start with you, Betty. Would you just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll have Virginia, and then I'll come back to Chris, okay?
Hi, my name is Betty Jagan, and I live in Sun City. I've been here for going on 12 years, and I'm originally from Illinois, but I've been in Texas quite a while. I moved here in 2008 from Orange, Texas, down at the border. My husband was in a petrochemical industry, and that's how we got there.
Okay. And I think, Betty, you said you've been a widow for 7 years?
Going on 12 years.
As a widow?
Oh, no, 7.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. And the reason I just want to highlight that, you're going to draw on some of your experiences to share with us in a minute. So I just wanted to give that brief context. Thanks, and appreciate you being here. Virginia Reed is the one. We have 2 Virginias going today, but could you introduce yourself?
My name's Virginia Reed, and my husband and I moved to Sun City in 2004. We lived in Michigan, where we'd both retired and wanted to live someplace where it didn't snow, but it was away from our children. I enjoyed this. He became ill and passed away last July. It was not real sudden. I knew he was not getting well, but it was hit me. I think a long time you never think about. Your husband is going to die. One of you is going to die someplace, and the other one's going to be left alone. And I think it's hard to not think about that. You always think you're going to be together, but.
And we're going to be hearing more about that, and that's such a good point. And I think that's one reason some of us don't want to deal with some of these issues, is we don't want to, we just don't want to think about that, and that's an important part. We'll come back and hear more about your story, Virginia and Betty's, in just a minute too. But Chris, I want to go ahead and invite you to introduce yourself. You have an interesting background, briefly about Traditions Health, but also your previous involvements.
Thank you, Virginia. My name is Chris Willis. I am with Traditions Health. I have been in the senior healthcare industry for about 15 years. I originally was introduced through assisted living ownership and operation, and then later in hospice ownership and operation. I've met with hundreds of families throughout my years by the bedside, and just kind of counseled them on, what's the journey like ahead. And my big passion is education, and just bringing this topic to light that is kind of a taboo subject in our society. It's not talked about a whole lot. My goal as a panelist today is just to provide an outside perspective, kind of a behind the scenes on what I've learned and experienced with families that are prepared versus families that they're not prepared, and the patient's or residents' goals as opposed to what the family's goals are, trying to get those to align. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
And we appreciate your commitment to education. As I said, Traditions Health is one of the sponsors of the Seniors Living Smarter seminars. Chris was on a panel last winter or fall, or last fall, I think, or maybe like summer. Another one of those taboo subjects about kind of death and dying, leaving a legacy. We don't want to talk about that stuff, but wow, it was a powerful panel that day also. With Chris, we had a representative from one of the funeral homes, but the need to be prepared. We just keep coming up on that, and that's what we're going to do today. So I talked about that we wanted to frame this in terms of story and wanting people to share ways you were prepared or ways you could have been more prepared so that we can all benefit from that. So I'm going to go ahead and Betty, I know, tell us, we didn't have you to tell us that much about your situation. Your husband died 7 years ago, but you made shared some interesting points with me about your experience through there and what you would like to call to people's attention. So let's start with Betty and then we'll hear from Virginia, and it'll be kind of a free-flowing dialogue today, okay?
Thanks, Virginia. Two major things come to mind, and the first is financial. Although I have always paid the monthly bills, my husband always dealt with any kind of investments or anything that was related to money from his company or insurance. And
okay. Let me just say one thing, Betty, and we're all on different services, and so sometimes our connections become unstable, so you just have to bear with us. I know we just missed, or at least I missed, I'm not sure if it was everybody, the last little part, but you said, generally you did the household finances, your husband did more of the investment part. And
yes.
Pick up on that.
Okay, so he also did anything related to insurance or any kind of financial matter that related to his company. And so a couple of times he tried to show me about some investments and how they worked. But I would forget when it would come up again, and he would get very frustrated with me because being an engineer, he felt like if he told me once, that was enough. I should get it. So, but I didn't get it. So when he passed away, it was very difficult. He did try to consolidate some investments that would help me, and that did help a lot, but it was still kind of, we're looking at financial spreadsheets I didn't understand. I'd have to analyze them for a long time to try to figure out what was probably going on. But so that was one big thing. The other thing is my husband was, he did a lot of his own carpentry and repairs around the house, and he was very good at just about anything he tackled. And unless it was something he absolutely could not do, he would never call a contractor to come in and do it. And consequently, after he passed away, I was not used to dealing with any kind of contractors. So as a woman, and as an older woman, I'm always leery about being taken advantage of financially. And actually, I had one time when it was not just financial, and that person is never coming back in my house, by the way. So, so I'm still feeling very unsure. I will put off and put off and put off calling contractors until I get desperate. So that's been a big issue for me because I just don't know how to deal with them. I think I do okay, but it's the fear. So
he generally did that, and it just never had worked for you to get that tuned into it. And so that's one of the things you see as something to encourage people to be more involved with in both areas as much as possible, perhaps.
Right. I never got to see him talking to contractors and maybe working out, a deal, you know, maybe negotiating, whatever. So I was at a disadvantage there. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the
All right.
financial end.
And for some people, I know they don't even know where all of it is. And that gets, you could be left high and dry sometimes. And the spouse may have it very well organized, but if we're not included in that, and that's, you're going to see that as one of the major parts of our document that we'll be sharing with you about the 10 commitments to organize for smarter decision making. So we're going to come back to that too. I want, because we're going to have people ask questions at the end, but I know we had one person who had their hand up. The names are, it's a long story why some of the names are not coming up, but G6, Jeff, do you want to unmute that person? I don't know if it was a logistical question or if it's a content question. Let's see here. Okay. Trying to unmute you. You may have to unmute yourself, and I don't know how the name comes up as G6. Can you click on your microphone to unmute yourself? Because I've clicked on unmute here. Okay, let's see. Well, there. Who is G6?
All of us. That's the name of the thing that we signed into.
Oh.
Huh. Okay. Well, okay, we're not going to worry about that right now. I don't. Oh, I bet I know. Is that someone from Provident Crossings?
No,
No. Okay.
it's all of us.
Okay, I'm sorry if we're going to have problems with hands up today. We'll do the best we can. I know Don Harper's name is repeated several times on my screen. He's my husband. He's here with me, not raising his hand, but I think when I register people on our home computer, somehow the names didn't come up right. So bear with us. We'll do the best we can. Okay, so Betty reminded us of the investment part, financial part that sometimes women are not as involved with. But yet you at least did the monthly household expenses, which sometimes and roles can reverse. Virginia Reed, you had a little bit more of a role reversal in your house. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yes, for all of most of our married life, I have handled all of the finances. My husband traveled a lot for business. I traveled also for business, but he occasionally would be in England for 3 or 4 weeks, and I would have to handle all the finances and any kind of help that needed. So, and I have done the finances and done our income tax every year myself. But so I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about one thing, about trying to keep him informed on what I was doing and how I was doing. And I worried that if something happened to me first, he would have a difficult time just finding where things were and what they were doing. As far as investments, we both made the same decision and were both involved in what our investments. And one thing I did learn from my brother handled my dad's finances, and he was having a terrible time finding all the things that my dad had invested in and getting it together when he was finishing that. And so we kept all of our finances with one person, and all our investments and our IRAs and everything are all in one person in a company, and that we've been very happy with. So that's something different. But I did worry about my husband me passing first, and my husband would having to handle this. As far as around the household, yes, my husband is an engineer. I'm also an engineer. And he would fix everything in the house and never called a plumber, never anything like that. And so I was sort of left with, I didn't have to worry about it, but I did worry about it because I did, what if he wasn't around to do any help? And so just trying to learn, I think towards the end, I was trying my best to learn what he was doing and what little things he had done that I needed to know. But I'm still, when it goes with plumbing or with other things, that trying to call somebody to have some help.
You know, when you mentioned about calling someone, that reminded me of Kathy Rice, who's on the call today. We have talked a lot about this topic. And she said one of the most important things that she learned from a friend was to ask for help. You know, and I think, and then you're right, you want to know who are the trusted people I can go to for help. And that's one of the things we've included in this document that we'll be sharing today. So it's interesting to hear, Betty, you were the one who you knew about the stuff, but you had not been as involved, and it was difficult. As you shared with me before, your husband had been ill for 2.5 years or so, so you knew something was coming, but that's not the good time to start working on some of the specifics too. Virginia, your story is you were concerned that if something happened to you, would your husband know where everything was or carry through with it, even though you'd both been involved in the decision making. I'm sure, Betty, you were too. So investments, finances just always seem to be an ongoing concern. Chris, I want to go ahead and skip to you, and we'll come back to Virginia and Betty. Along those lines, you've had the opportunity to work with, observe many families, many situations. Words of wisdom related to those topics of the finances and then just the household management in terms of repairs, contractors, so on.
Yeah. So I've been third party to, like I said, hundreds of families in the last 1 week up to 2 years of life of a spouse or brother or sister. And oftentimes I'd say about 75% of the time, half of their affairs are not in order, regards to finances, wills, arrangements, afterlife arrangements. So, you know, we always, you know, we use social workers in our industry and hospice to help guide those things. But there's a lot of work, a lot of things, simple things, just document location that can help. And you know, I like to use what's called an access folder. Now, an access folder it's a folder that contains all of your important documents needed to continue on financials, insurance, maintenance of your physical plant of your home. And you don't have to get all the documents in this folder, but almost think of it as a map to where you can list where all these things are located: insurance policies, who your financial planner is, phone numbers to your financial planner, usernames and passwords to your online banking accounts, just a list of your banking institutions. A folder that you would think that if someone were to come into your home and want to know exactly where everything is, that's of important matters to you, needs to go in that folder. That can alleviate, you know, months and months of headache and organization. You know, for me, I've been fortunate to where I've seen several situations where this is not planned out, right? These documents are all over the place. Spouses not even being on insurance policies, spouses not even being listed on certain investment accounts. And when that happens, those accounts get frozen. They go into probate, and the court has to deal with it. Nightmare situations where just with 45 minutes and a phone call and pre-planning could have been easily avoided. I've also been on the side of everything was already completely organized and thought out. All the documents were easy accessible. In those situations, those allow for a transition of a surviving spouse to go as appropriately as they can. That allows for grieving to happen appropriately. That allows for children, you know, children taking over finances is an extremely stressful undertaking. Most of the children have full-time jobs. They have children in school. They have active sports with their children, so it's usually not done well when a child manages finances of a surviving spouse, simply because their surviving spouse doesn't have the access or the knowledge and wasn't shown where these things are or how they operate. So so yeah, it's, I can never, I'm in the fortunate place where I've seen how it's not done properly or effective. So I've taken all the steps as if I wasn't going to be here tomorrow. I've already pre-planned. I have an access folder. I travel a lot, and something could happen to me tomorrow, but my wife can go to a folder, and I brought her to financial meetings with my financial advisor. She doesn't know the details of all of our investments, but knows where our investments are, knows where all of our insurance policies are, who the beneficiaries are. So if I were to not be living tomorrow, my wife could focus on, my daughter, her future, and grieving appropriately, and not have to be scrambling and seeking out others that have no knowledge of our finances at all, to help navigate that. So, knowledge is power, and the more that a household as an entity can get on the same page, not if, but when that time comes. It's the only guarantee that we have in life, that one of us, everyone on this conference will pass away, and they will be leaving a legacy with someone after that. And I think it's our responsibility, who are heads of the household, who have that access, to leave that legacy intact, and still moving forward.
I want to skip, Jeff, could you put up the slide or that kind of highlights this document that we're going to be sharing? Because then I think people can respond to that too. There's 10 commitments to organize for smart decisions. As I worked with the panel and kept hearing stories, and we've all seen a variety of file folders and different things. What we were really committed to is, what is that critical content people need to really know about? And this can be much more comprehensive, but I just want to briefly go over the categories. You'll be getting this tomorrow. But when we broke it down, looking at, do you really know the personal and family information, especially today when we have many second marriages or whatever, do we have the information about everybody's family? And knowing where, like Chris said, it's not having everything right in that place, but where are birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates from previous marriages or from children, adoption papers, all of those, well, we know vaguely where they are. If we stop to let our spouse or ourselves know where these materials are, it can save us a lot of grief. And Chris mentioned a while ago just the importance of usernames and passwords. My husband and I started a little notebook last year, been invaluable, where we keep all of our usernames and passwords. And now some of us we don't write them down, but if you don't write them down somewhere, you have problems too. So we had a section on personal and family, a listing, and you develop it appropriate for your style, whether a notebook, a file folder, or whatever. And then the legal documents in August, I believe it is, we will be focusing on legal parts, understanding wills, trust, power of attorney. So we've identified specific documents. Do you know where they are? Does the person who's going to be responsible for your estate know where they are? So important to have power of attorney. We just had a real estate transaction going on. We were ready to close last week, and the husband passed away 3 days before. The daughter had been signing things with power of attorney. We had it set up. Fortunately, we were able to go ahead and not have to wait for probate. But it's having a strong attorney, in our case, an escrow agent, a title company, that can really help us do that. But the critical part, the daughter told me afterwards, she said, I could just tell things were changing in the fall, and that's when I decided I really needed to get a durable power of attorney so she could carry on. It is not continue after death. But if they were not able to make some decisions, she could really step in and help. And it was a tremendous savings for, or tremendous assistance as we were selling their condo in their case. So legal is an important section. Also, sometimes the spouses may have other kind of business agreements, arrangements. Sometimes these have been going on for a long time, and are we familiar? Do we know who's involved, who the contact person is? We're just giving you some bullet points to think about. Household. Do we know where our car registration papers are? Do we know about our utility providers? Major home improvements people have made over the years can be so important when we get ready to sell a home. When did you last replace your roof or your air conditioning, water heater? If we save that kind of documentation. I know last year I had a client, I think she's on the call today, Cheryl Wills, who had a meticulous notebook of all the things they'd done to their house. And it was just a real gold mine when we were marketing and selling the home. Insurance. Betty mentioned insurance, and we're going to talk about assets next, but do we really know where life insurance policies are, health insurance policies, what kind of coverage do we have? Just things to pull together and know where that information is. Then our financial assets and investments, where are those accounts? Who manages them? Whether they be in our bank, credit union, what kind of checking or savings, certificates of deposit, and those who have money invested with stockbrokers, are they individually managed, or just having the particulars can be such, it really gives a peace of mind. And what are the liabilities? What is the mortgage on that home? Is there a mortgage? What about car loans or the other liabilities, including credit cards or personal loans? If we can talk and share and know where the information is, it makes so much difference. Suggestion that we always have the last 3 years of our income tax records, just if a spouse passes away, so we can have that documentation. Funeral and burial plans, we had a session on that last year, and that can be a whole nother section, but at least something for us to think about and be aware of. And who are important advisors we turn to? Now, I had over here, and there's a home and personal. Who are the contractors? Who are the repair people that we turn to? So both people know. Or if something happens that our children have to pick up, who do they know to turn to? And then we look more for advisors. Who is our attorney, our accountant, financial planner, stockbroker, realtor, a volunteer? But if somebody knows who to turn to, it simplifies things. And so we just encourage people to be prepared. And also personal effects. We've talked from time to time when we have to liquidate, we're getting rid of things. Or what are those special items? Who do we want to go to? Why are they special? If we can have all of that in a notebook of some type, file folder, file drawer, whatever. But I'll be curious to get feedback from people after you use this, carry through with it. We may have a show and tell next month to see how many of us have worked on it. And I'm sure there are going to be other parts that we could add to that. But I just wanted to let you know, one of the things I miss in the webinars is not being able to give you the handout and people take notes and you can check it off as we go along. But you will be getting those. I thought it paralleled so much what Chris was speaking about. So I wanted to go ahead and call that to your attention. Now I want to go back to Betty in Virginia. As you listen to this and you think about, I know one situation where a woman and her husband knows that we're seeing the dementia setting in, and how do we work towards this? As you draw from your experiences or you're thinking about this after having been through this, can you give us any specific suggestions that you think would ease this for people?
Well, as far as financial goes, I would, if I knew then what I know now, I would have insisted that my husband repeatedly show me how to do some things, because just like with computer, if I don't use something regularly, I will lose it. And so, you know, insisting on that is a very important thing, I think, for, and both ways, because like Virginia said, you don't know who's going to go first. So it's wise for both of you to be up to speed on where things are and, you know, how to work with them.
Virginia Reed, you want to add?
Yes, one thing I said about 3 years ago, since we lived in Michigan and for a long time, our financial advisor is in Toledo. And we took our youngest son, who's going to be our executor, with us to a meeting with him when we were up north visiting. And just so the two of them could meet each other and know, because someday our son's going to have to deal with him and work through things, and to tell him some of our fears about how to handle our finances when we're gone. And our son was quite welcome and enjoyed meeting him, and the two had a good relationship. So I'm quite happy that that's going to pass on. One question I did want to ask Chris, is it when you're a widow, should you have one of your sons or your daughter who's going to be your executor, put them on your checking accounts or your bank accounts? I don't know whether that's a good idea or not.
Yeah, so you can, almost all banks, you can have a beneficiary to the checking account, meaning they don't have access unless the original account holders are deemed, either they passed away or they're deemed incapable of making decisions on their own. So until that power is granted through maybe a power of attorney document, they don't have access to those checking accounts until you yourself are deemed incapacitated to handle your financial affairs. And that would be determined by a physician. So I would highly recommend that, because if there's no beneficiary to those checking accounts or no plan for that money post, afterlife, then it's going to get held up. We actually dealt with that with my grandfather. My grandfather was in your situation. My grandmother handled all the finances. When she passed away, my grandfather was not on their checking account. So it was about a 2-month ordeal to get access. Those funds were frozen. Even we had mountains of documentation, but the accounts were frozen. Bills weren't getting paid. My family had to step in and pay the rent at their assisted living. It wasn't good. All of his Social Security checks were going into that account he couldn't have access to. So highly recommend that there's a beneficiary on those accounts. And they're very protected. It's not like that person can come in and wipe it out whenever they want. They're only able to use that account in the event that someone passes away or they're deemed incompetent by a physician to handle their financial affairs. It's protected very, very well. That relationship is.
And it can so simplify things if the situation comes up where no one else is on that account and it is frozen, and it's, even though you, like Chris said, you had the documentation, it's the order in which things are done can make a difference too. Mm-hmm. So that was a great question. One of those notes I hope people will think about, making sure. Did you have another question, Virginia?
I said we did put our son on our safety deposit box. So mm-hmm. He is definitely on that account, and I have to let him know where the keys are, but he could easily get in. That's where we keep our will and our birth certificates and all that information. So
right. That's great.
And safety deposit box can really be an interesting challenge. My first husband passed away a few years ago, and my son was wanting to get things out of the safety deposit box. Well, my name had never been taken off the safety deposit box, even though we'd been divorced a number of years. But so I had to physically go with John in person. So those things, keeping things up to date can make such a difference too. When Betty mentioned about kind of being insistent or persevering with your spouse about, I need this information, how can we work to, and that, I think it also applies to adult children. we go through this, you need to have your legal documents in order. Okay, so finally we get our legal documents done. Truthfully, have we done with them what we should be doing? No. So my son would be our executor, and I said, John, we have our documents. Oh, I'll get them later, Mom. I don't want to. They don't want to deal with those issues either. And going through this is reminding me of how do we create those conversations? And there may be some, you all are people in our audience who have some suggestions too, but we can't leave adult children out of this for a number of reasons, to make it easier for them. And so we often focus on spouses, but the adult children too.
May I make?
Sure.
Yeah, may I make a comment?
Mhm.
My husband and I never had children, and the only relatives I have are my sister, who is 6 years older than I am, and her 2 children, a son and a daughter. She would prefer not to be the executor, my sister. My niece would be very good at it, but I have concerns about the fact that it's come to my attention over the last few years that money kind of goes through her fingers very quickly. And her brother has absolutely no interest, and the first difficulty he ran into, he would run as far as he could away from Texas to get away from it. So I'm kind of in a dilemma. And I know that I could actually have a financial institution operate as the executor. Is that something that I would need to set up with them or through a lawyer?
Chris, I think you have experience to draw on, or help us with that.
I'll make this short for the sake of time, but I often see this is a situation where we'll have a family pass. There'll be 6 kids, and they're all kind of after ulterior motives, as you can say. So you can. The thing is you decide what are your goals for your finances, right? You determine how you want your finances dispersed when you pass, and then you give those to your financial advisor, and he can actually be the executor of everything, can set certain amounts. That's not anything that you have to bring your children in on. Those are, you set those goals and you set those wants for what you and your husband's legacy is going to be. And it's very clean when it goes through a financial advisor. You can limit the power of certain children or certain family members. You can allocate, funds to nieces, nephews. You can put money in trusts. It really allows you to really nothing that you would want to happen. Your wishes are carried out in a very, very legal format when you go through your financial advisor, because at that point, there's no emotion involved in the dispersion of that money. There's no ulterior motives. It's strictly what your wishes and your legacy want for your estate. We highly recommend it to families that are in kind of turmoil situations or where they're not the best family dynamics. And it works really, really well. Because at the end of the day, it's about protecting your legacy and your wishes when you're not there. So yeah, it's a great point, and I would highly recommend that. If those dynamics do exist, I would highly recommend that. And it's very simple to do, and you don't have to have anyone's permission. You list their name, and they pretty much get a letter in the mail letting know what their rights to that estate are.
Okay, thank you.
And that will be a topic that will be a good one for us to revisit next time too. When we talk about flipping the money switch, that's going to go a variety of ways, but being prepared. So this is sort of setting the stage, I think, for our next 2 webinars. They're going to focus on financial and then on legal. So, okay. anything else you want to add, Virginia or Betty?
Something that I mentioned in our dry run last week is it's just a general thing. I would recommend, ladies, do not let your husband drive the car all the time when you are with him. You need to get comfortable getting out on the expressway because you don't want your world to shrink to nothing if he passes away before you. You need to feel secure when you're driving.
Thanks for bringing it up, Betty. We did have an interesting discussion last week about just that whole importance of driving. And we remember we've had before, Megan, who works with people on driving. Sometimes the people haven't been driving for a while. You may feel insecure, and she's great at helping people build up the driving skills and all, but so important. And what you said about not letting your world shrink, you know, we have to live life. Well, challenges right now, perhaps with COVID, but yet, seriously, how do we continue to be active, be engaged? And peace of mind is a lot of it. I want to share a quote, and the document we'll give you today, there is a reference to a book, On Your Own, A Widow's Passage to Emotional and Financial Well-Being. And some of you may be aware of this. Actually, Kathy Rice, who has her hand up, we'll call in just on a minute. She called this book to my attention, and then I ordered it. I said, it's great. And she said, oh, I never really got it. Someone recommended it to me, but I think it's a great resource. There is a paragraph I want to read because it really expresses why I was so committed to this webinar and for us to get the organization and feel more informed. The authors are Alexander Armstrong and Mary Donahue. One is an attorney and one is a financial planner, both widows. They write, it has been said that grief coupled with lack of financial knowledge is crippling. We, the authors, believe that the better you as a widow are able to come to terms with your loss emotionally, the better able you will be to address the financial consequences. Similarly, the more you understand about your financial situation, the less anxious you will be, which in turn will contribute to your emotional healing. And I just think that's a powerful paragraph, a reassuring. And again, the reason that we're bringing this webinar to you is to encourage. And I know a lot of you are far along, have already done all of this. Others of you may be taking steps, and that's what we're wanting to do today. I want to go ahead, let's call on Kathy Rice, or maybe some other hands up now, and I apologize if we're going to have problems with raised hands. But Kathy, can you, okay, are you, yeah, Kathy?
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
I will address the we part of from we to me.
Okay.
I suggest to my friends that they trade jobs / activities with their spouse for 2 or 3 months, because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And if you're forced to do what your spouse is doing and vice versa, a lot of times you'll learn where you're lacking information.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You know, it reminds me too that hopefully we're a team together on this. And while nothing against you engineers, Virginia, but sometimes, you know, engineers want it done this way and they expect you to catch on, and some of us don't catch on quite that quickly. But how, you know, we're working together on this to make it easier for whoever is the survivor, you know. And I think we have to see that as that kind of, we want to be prepared. Last year I was at the funeral homes one day meeting with them about our seminars then. And the person from the funeral home came to our meeting, was late. He said, I'm sorry, but I just had a death occurred. And the family had called. They knew nothing. You know, they said they didn't even know what insurance there was. The wife just, you know, had not been involved in any of the kids did not involve. And he was just shaking his head about, Chris, I'm sure you see this. It's how sad that is, you know. Only I could ask now, you know. So that's always been one of those stories playing in the back of my mind, is how do we encourage and support people along this road. Other questions from our participants today that you'd like to raise? Linda J. Can you
hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
My question has to do with consolidating. I have done that, but I feel like my house is a little vulnerable to either an intruder or someone who would visit my home and suddenly find every kernel of information of importance so consolidated and so available. So how best to keep this, that it, you know, someone doesn't pick up and carry away a lockbox and have your life notes in it.
So you're concerned, the benefits, you have it all so organized, but maybe that does make it too accessible in some ways, or that's what you're worried about, making you more vulnerable. Chris, can you address any of that for us?
Yeah, you know, I think the kind of the age-old solution is either storing it off-site in a safety box, or getting a safe in your home. I have a safe in my home. It's bolted into the foundation, so you can't take it. It's fireproof, so in the event that the house burns down, those are the only things that will survive. It can be a costly investment. You know, some of those safes are $1,000. Some of them are not. But safety deposit box, storing that stuff off-site could be a solution. But at a minimum, a locked safe that is somehow secured to a part of your home to where someone can't come in and yank it out. If you look at you know, restaurants or any businesses that have cash on hand or important documents, those safes are bolted to the foundation. You can call out, there's lots of companies that do that, that come out and install one of those. It could get pricey, but for what you pay for, it's the ultimate insurance policy that those are kept safe. Even in the event of a fire or some kind of natural disaster, a massive flood in your home or something, it's money worth spent for sure, because that is a big possibility that those could get damaged, stolen, and that'd be awful.
You know, along those lines of kind of security and protection, you know, last month, our webinar had to do with personal safety and security and scams and so on. And I think a big concern that we have, or some of us need to be more concerned about it, is just our computers and the safety on our computers. How accessible do we have protection on our computers? You know, it begins to freak you out when you look at one thing and all of a sudden you start getting all the information about related, so people know what we're doing, or the computer knows what we're doing. Somebody does. But in audience participants may have suggestions too. Any things that you all have found, or Chris, that you all recommend, just in terms of being very secure with our computers? I know we have, and we're seeing more levels of passwords now, where we often have to have another layer with text code to our cell phones. But we do see hackings going on, and you know, problems. Any things from your experience, Chris?
I think Bill has a hand raised.
Okay. Oh, Bill or Bev Holland. Okay. Was that related to this question?
Mute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Bev.
Okay, I have a very simple thing that Bill and I did, and I learned it from a friend who lost her husband. But before her husband died, they sat down together with their complete address book and put a different colored dot on people that needed to be notified upon your spouse's death. You know, red for him, green for me. Well, now people are going to say, we all have the same friends. Well, we do, but there were a lot that were special to me or special to him that just has the one dot and not both dots. But, you know, I just thought that was a very good idea for this friend to share with me before her husband passed away.
It's interesting when you mention that, Bev, because as I was working on the document when I did this section about funeral and burial plans, I should have, maybe we'll add it on here before we actually send this out tomorrow. But part of the ones I'd often see was who are the people who should be contacted. We have, in the first section, we have immediate family, but you know, it is helpful. So I think we need to, thank you for adding it. Contacts that should be made, okay? Thanks, Bev, for sharing that. Okay, other questions that people have? Got that one, okay. All right. So as you've been reflecting on this, Chris, any other general words of wisdom you want to provide for people today?
Yeah, you know, I always tie it back to legacy. That's a big word that I've used for a long time. That word for me has evolved. I used to think legacy was, you know, what kind of financial or, you know, asset that I would leave behind to my family. But, you know, I look at legacy now as, you know, what kind of person do I want to be remembered as? And what is the greatest gift that I can give to my spouse or my family moving forward? Everyone on this call is living amazing lives and has done amazing stuff, organizational planning, all to get up to this point to leave behind a legacy. That legacy can be severely diminished if all of these things aren't in order. So, you know, my goal is always to, you know, practice and preach, you know, preserving that legacy. And part of that is getting these things organized, to be able to hand these things over to your family as you leave. And this is how they're, you know, set up for their life. This is how they're supported. These are all the layers that you've added to their life and to your family whenever you're not here anymore. I think that's the greatest gift, is being able to preserve these things in a manner to which they can actually be used, whether that's, you know, leaving your, you know, all the things we talked about in that access folder and everything on this list is all a legacy that everyone has spent 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years building up. And without this list, that legacy, it gets diminished. So I would just encourage our participants to really use this list. It's a phenomenal list. I know it takes time, but look at this list as your roadmap to the legacy that you leave behind. The more thorough this is, the more your legacy is intact. I feel really strongly about that, and I've been kind of preaching that for a while now, and I've seen it done really well, and I've seen it done not so well. So I appreciate being invited on this panel, Virginia. It's been great. Thank you.
Well, as you were speaking, Chris, and you probably know this book and others may know it too, David Soley's book, How to Communicate with Elders. I think that's the right title. It's something similar. He talks about stages of life. And as we're in this, our older stage of life, you know, two big factors, maintaining control and what is the legacy we're leaving. And I think that's so true. And now this book is really written more like for supposedly adult children to communicate with seniors, or, you know, how it's that choice. It's being in control. And I think having these kinds of documents make us feel stronger, like the quote I read.
Absolutely.
So we need to be in control. Oh, my kids are going to make those decisions. Not sure, is that really what you want? I guess that's what you want, but give yourself more credit. You know what's best for you. So making decisions, being in control, and what is the legacy? And it's getting a handle. Legacy, you know, the stories of our lives, the financial parts, and so on. And also we've talked even just about the things, the personal items that can represent our lives to people. And so there are lots of ways to come at that, but I appreciate your calling that to our attention. Let's see, Denise Maleska, I believe your hand is up. Can you, let's see if we can hear from Denise. Okay, I'm glad you're on the call. Denise has had challenges getting on the call last time, so we're, let's take another step. We'll see if we can. Are you there, Denise?
Yes.
There you are. Yeah, you're not only on the call, you're speaking. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention one thing. About 5 to 7, 8 years ago, I did what you're suggesting, and that is to put together kind of a summary of what I would consider in my, like I said, that's my dog, so forgive me. Hey. And what I didn't think about at the time was that I had to look at it every once in a while because it changed. So my professional contacts, like my doctors, I needed to change because they changed. My funeral plans changed because I moved. And so what I'm saying is really just a suggestion that anybody who does this in detail, you're buying into a bigger job for a longer period of time.
Okay. Updates are so important. Thanks for reminding us of that. Okay. Other questions that we have?
Looks like
Words
Kath,
of wisdom to be shared. Okay. Betty, did you have something you were wanting to add?
I was just going to say, as far as contractors go, if people are unsure about that sort of thing, I would say ask friends. I'm on Nextdoor, and whenever somebody recommends a handyman and says a lot of good things about them, I'll write down the name and the contact information that they provide, and I make a list. I don't currently have one that I'm using, but I've had mixed results with handymen. And so I'm continuing to do that. But also I recommend, ask neighbors for recommendations about contractors or how they handled something. For instance, I think I mentioned to you, Virginia, that a couple doors down, one of the neighbors painted his house recently. And then within a week, the next door neighbor to him painted his house. And I ran into the second one day and I said, how did you know you need to paint your house? And he said, well, after the first neighbor painted his house, I thought mine looked kind of bad. And then I thought, well, that doesn't seem like a good idea. I don't want to paint my house and spend the money before I have to. My house looks perfectly fine. So it's those kinds of things. How do you know when something needs to be updated or fixed? That kind of thing. But ask neighbors. And I don't know if my friend Kathy is online, but Kathy and Alan Sleeper have been invaluable friends, making recommendations and helping me, advising me. So, and I try not to abuse them. I try to spread around the pain.
People like to help and like to share, so that's important. I know as someone in the industry, as a realtor, with people, clients I'm working with, others often call and the quality of work, dependability, and so on. So get to build your support group that can help with that is important. Judy Mayo, I believe you had a question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, great. Hi, Judy.
Hi. I'm just wondering, in regards to decision making, if the panel might talk about the idea of getting guardianship, if and when that might be appropriate.
Okay. Guardianship, and we're going to pick up on that when we do our webinar about the legal discussions, but still it's an important point to bring up today. And some of you may address it from personal experience. Chris, I'm sure you can address it from your observation experiences. Guardianship, from what I it can be kind of a
guardianship's a
careful.
it's a pretty strong legal term. Has to be determined by a court. There has to be a reason to establish guardianship. Most of the time, if the person is incapable of making decisions, if it's a memory condition or a physical ailment, so definitely would defer to legal advice for that. But we see it a lot. I see it a lot. It's very common. There's no right or wrong reasons to do it. It's very, very common. It's recommended in some situations, in some situations it's not. We've seen it go well if the intentions of guardianship are intact. We've seen it go not well if the intentions of guardianship are skewed. But yes, I mean, if it's needed, it's a great preventative measure to protect assets and just to kind of keep the car on the rails per se towards those last times.
And along that line, that can also, I would think, involve, with your medical provider recommendations as well as the attorney. I know from real estate point of view, if people are able, we can often do things with power of attorney but then we're going to see, more and more with dementia and when do we cross over to needing something like the guardianship? So that'll be one of our topics that's coming up in a later seminar as well. Anything you want to add to that, Betty or Virginia, if you all experienced that or not?
I was, when you're talking about finding a handyman or finding people to do things about your house, I think you have to look at your neighbors, look at your friends, and use your best judgment, because sometimes people are going to recommend something that is not good. I know my husband had a handyman come in that he was not happy with. A lot of my neighbors think he's wonderful. I do not want to use that person, but I think using who you might know by yourself for other reasons, I said, get to find a handyman through the church rooms or something like that. So it's a good choice.
And sometimes it's just remembering to keep that contact information. How do we, we know the person, but do we know, we may only know a first name or a nickname, but we don't know how to get in contact. So that's back to, and there is one of the topics that was mentioned in our document that we have for you. Catherine Rice, do you have a new question or did I not put your hand down before?
Well, I was just going to go back to legacy.
Okay.
My husband and I did not think about legacy so much, and he was hospitalized suddenly. And the pulmonologist said to us, you have 30 minutes to discuss end-of-life issues. And he grabbed my iPad and immediately wrote a letter to the children, which has been so meaningful to them. And so I have done that now. Along with I call it the family notebook with all my information, but I've written a letter to my children so that when I pass, they'll have that.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about that. So glad that you shared that. And I'm sure there are other wonderful ideas and resources that people have. We've asked for questions, but are there other kinds of resources or tips that people in our audience can provide?
Well, one thing that I just dawned on me, I said when I was writing my husband's obituary for the paper, and the kids wanted to put it in one of the old papers where they used to live, and about things about my husband, and they sort of helped me edit it. But they all sat down and said, we want you to write your own obituary. Because they said, there were things about my dad they didn't know until I wrote the obituary. And there's things about me in my early life that they don't know. And I thought, I haven't done it yet, but I keep thinking about it.
Okay. I think some of us drag our feet again for a number of reasons, or we want, oh, it has to be so perfect. It has to be some grandiose, eloquent piece. But getting bits and pieces together again, so people know our history. That's what's so important. That's one of the things we've talked about as we go through and downsizing and finding these, even little small trinkets around the house. I remember this was a little magic game my father used to play with my son. And so that's something that John needs to have, because we have pictures of him and Granddad playing with that little magic toy thing. And, somebody else, it wouldn't mean anything, just toss it out. But it does, so that's another example of that. Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, talking about setting, designating certain members of your family to get certain memorabilia after the fact. Some of them may know that you have those items and have admired it, but they don't understand why they were important to you. So perhaps in addition to possibly writing a letter to your children or your heirs, put a description of why this vase had special meaning to you and why you kept it and why you're now passing it on to them.
The story, again, is what is so important. Our 10th item on our document here, personal effects, a distribution list with the note about why is it important. And I've shared this at many seminars. I have some gold rim glasses in my grandparents' china cabinet. I don't remember the whole story. I think they were the first gift opened on my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. But the story never got written down. My parents are no longer living. My sister's not living. So now the story becomes what I want to make it. But I often wish, I had paid more attention or made some notes about things like that. So, okay. See if we have anything else here. Well, I want to thank our panelists for taking time to be with us, sharing your stories. That is so important. And as we continue, preparation comes up on all of our seminars. That's what we're about: educate, equip, and inspire to make decisions. And this kind of discussion will continue as we move in June or July. We'll be talking about we have a slide about the financial issues, flipping the money switch. And in August, we'll be dealing with legal questions, probate, wills, and so on. But I also want to remind you, and Chris asked me to stress, and I'll put it in the email today, he's willing to answer questions, provide direction, resources to people. He is a fantastic resource. And he was willing for us to put out his contact information so people can follow up with him. And so we will certainly do that. I'm available, what can I do to help you? We really want to ease the transition as people are looking at downsize. And I think we just had a hand to come up from Connie Aldrich and Don Garvey. Did you all have a question?
No, can you understand and hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine, Don.
Now is the time to do some pre-planning for your ultimate pre-planning for your funeral. Each of us has our own burial plot and headstone in place. We got what we wanted, and it takes some pain off of those who are left behind.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Thank you for sharing that. And we've had seminars about that, and you're so right, so important. We want to make it easier for people. Okay. Jeff Cramp, who's been our tech person. Is there anything else that we had talked about covering that we didn't cover today that we want to call the people's attention?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. All right. Well, you'll be getting the email tomorrow. And what I would really appreciate too, when you think of things, you know, it could go on forever and ever. I understand that. But if there are topics that we have not included that you think we should include, please, you know, let me know. We'll be doing updates and revisions and always want to keep enhancing what we share with you. So I think with that, again, I'll thank our panelists and I thank our attendees for being here today and look forward to seeing you in July. Registration will open next week for that webinar. And now that we've been reminded that yes, you can invite friends and family away from here to join us. So we appreciate Ann Gowdy sharing the word with Gretchen Sutherland and hope you found it interesting, Gretchen. So we will see you in July. If I can do anything for you in the meantime, please feel free to give me a call and stay healthy and well during this unusual time in the world. So have a great day. Thanks for being with us.
Virginia.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks,
Nice to
everyone.
meet you.
Thank you, panelists, and I'll be following up with you all. Thank you.